Coming back on the air.
Johnny?
You're still afraid.
I'm not afraid.
There wasn't a sign of life and death.
We've got to do something.
Why don't you just keep calm?
You're telling us we gotta risk our lives just because somebody might need help.
Yeah, something like that. They dragged you out there and beat those things.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Haven't you had enough?
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
All right, good evening, and welcome to NIGHTCAST, the Night of the Living Dead podcast. I'm Jim. Sorry that we weren't here 2 weeks ago. Some scheduling got messed up, but they will redo that show at some point about the original Living Dead festival. But tonight, we have a couple of guests on. We're going to be talking about the Disney series Phineas and Ferb, Disney animation series, and in particular, one of their fourth season episodes. I believe it's a double episode, Night of the Living Pharmacists, obviously based on Night of the Living Dead. And the reason I wanted to have these gentlemen on is because this is a great example of an actual homage to George Romero's movie. Whereas a lot of other people claim that they're doing homages and they're not homages. This is an actual homage. So it's a really good episode to check out and see what good writing and a good homage is. So without further ado, let's bring them on. We have Scott Peterson, the head writer on Phineas and Ferb. Welcome. And Joshua Pruett, co-writer with Scott on the Night of the Living Pharmacists episode. So welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us, Jim.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So Josh and I met through Josh shopping at the Night of the Living Dead store.
I bought a pillow. I bought merch.
So yeah, that was great. We appreciate that, coming to the Image 10 store and picking up a pillow. And I think you got something else. I think you got a mug or something.
I
Couple things.
did. Yeah.
So what happened with that was during one of these nightcasts, I think it was the first one, we had a contest for all the people that had purchased that week or something like that, and your name was the name that came up. And
it was so random. It was so great.
You were pretty surprised when I messaged you and sent you your bonus gift. So
oh man, I got signed 8x10s. It was golden. Yeah. And so then what I did, right? I emailed you and was like, hey, this is kind of serendipitous because I worked on this particular episode of Phineas, and have been a Night of the Living Dead fan most of my life, and Scott as well. So it seemed like that was worth sharing, and that's how we got to here.
Yeah, and then I talked to the other folks involved, including Gary Striner, and he was like, "Why aren't we having these guys on Nightcast?" So here we are. So first, maybe explain to everybody who doesn't know, including myself, because I was unaware of the series, the animation series, but checked it out and really enjoyed it. And as I said, it's a wonderful homage to the film, where it actually has some great writing and some clever little pop culture things in it without being just too over the top, which I personally don't enjoy when there's just all these Easter eggs for everybody to find. But it's great because it's kind of its own thing. Explain what's the concept of Phineas and Ferb?
Scott, do you want to take that? Yeah.
I'll take that, and then you jump on to explain how this came to be. Phineas and Ferb is about two brothers who try and make the most out of every single day of the summer. So there's 104 days of summer vacation, and every day they try and invent something cool or do something amazing. And for some reason, they have a pet platypus who's undercover as a secret agent who fights an evil mad scientist. So there's always an A story and a B story that intersect. Right. It makes more sense if you see it. It doesn't make much sense when you explain it.
But so their platypus, I get the sense that their pet, they're not really aware of his dual life. Is that
not
correct?
At all.
Yeah,
they're
so
not
kind of doing that. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then who's the main, the main antagonist there?
It's kind of, for the boys, it's their sister Candace. She wants to, in quotes, bust them for all the things they do every day, which she thinks if she did them, she'd get in trouble. So it's not fair that they do it. And then this character, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, is the evil scientist who's opposed to Perry every day. They're each other's nemesis.
Right. And I got the sense, again, from just watching, I think I watched a couple episodes, but from what I saw, I got the sense that these two groups of characters kind of like work parallel. The evil scientist he's more of a bumbling, maybe he has aspirations to be this like evil genius, but he's more of like this bumbling guy who just really wants attention.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well summarized, Jim. Well said.
He's got a lot of issues.
Yeah, so he's not all bad. He's he's going through things like everybody else does, and with just like a little bit of attention and respect that he's not getting.
I think so. Yeah,
that's accurate.
And then the two stories usually dovetail in some way, that one story takes away part of the other story or vice versa. So it's like, oh, that's nice that they both had something to do with each other, when for 21 of the 22 minutes, they have nothing to do with each other.
Right. So then how did the Night of the Living Pharmacists episode come about?
So essentially it comes down to me joining the show in season 4. I joined as a writer storyboard artist, and Scott was already head writer for two seasons or so at that point, almost 3. And I kind of, the way that Phineas is built, kind of the genius of it being multi-genre and having all these multiple stories running, kind of the Dan Povenmire and Swampy Marsh, who created the show, they built kind of the best sandbox in animation ever. It's one of the most fun shows to write for and create for. And when I joined in season 4, I was a writer, storyboard artist, and our responsibilities were to take outlines that were generated by Scott's writer's room and turn them into 11-minute episodes. So they would give us 2 or 3 page outlines, and then myself and my partner, we would split up 11 minutes of animation, essentially a full episode. And it was our responsibility to both write and to storyboard that entire story. We'd write all the dialogue. We would draw all of the storyboard panels, so that's 11 minutes of something that someone can cut. And I loved being on the show, but I wanted to write more. And so I was a little bit obnoxious, and I started asking around. And I was like, hey, can I write more? I want to write some of these outlines, not just the episodes. I would love to pitch on these outlines. And so I asked around, and people said, oh, we don't do that. The writers hate our ideas. And I was like, what? That seems crazy. And so I went to the source. I went to Scott. And he and I didn't really know each other. And what I didn't know was that Scott was a huge horror fan.
Yeah.
And so we had that in common. And so I said, hey, Scott, can I pitch you stuff? And he's like, well, do you have any samples? And I was like, yeah, I got a couple things. And the things I had were horror related. I had a horror spec that was original, and then a radio show that I had produced that had like short horror stories. And I was like, yeah, I can write, I swear. And I sent that stuff to Scott. And okay, Scott, you tell a little bit about your impressions of me at this point.
Yeah, I think I would agree with everything you said, except that you were a little obnoxious. That might not be the right adjective there. But no, he came in and he had some great stuff. And Dan and Swampy and I had always wanted to crack a zombie episode. And the problem is with a Disney children's cartoon, you can't really have dead things, people eating brains, violence. And so, like, what else is left? And so we were never able to crack that until Josh came in and he said, I got an idea. And Josh, you can say what your idea was.
Yeah, so I was kind of nursing these concepts, and one of them was Night of the Living Pharmacists, because I've loved Night of the Living Dead almost my entire life. So from being a little kid and being terrified and being like, oh, it's black and white, which means I can probably stomach this. I can handle a horror movie that's black and white, to then learning about Image 10 and learning about, what it took to get the movie made and what happened with the copyright and all these things. And I just became obsessed. And I thought it'd make a great template for something that kids could also watch, because I watched it when I was very young. And what I realized was that, if you took all of those zombie or living dead tropes, all the things we recognize, so, people getting in a house and boarding up the windows, it being a contagion, the idea of people having to, come together and unify desperate people against this exterior threat. I was like, you could take all those elements. It doesn't have to be somebody who's dead. It could be Doofenshmirtz, and he uses one of his innators, and he essentially duplicates himself. He turns himself into a virus. And so I thought, that could be very funny. And then my other thought is that Dan Poffenmeyer does the voice of Doof, so I thought he would get a kick out of getting to voice every single character in the episode. And so I pitched that to Scott, and then...
And I said, that's amazing. And pitched it on to Dan and Swampy, and they said, that's amazing. And so we said, well, maybe we can make an exception and have Josh help write this, which turned out to be a fantastic idea. So Josh and I wrote it together, and it's been one of the most popular shows that we've done. It gets a lot of feedback. People love it. There's kids who are adults now who say they saw it and it scared the whatever word you want to say out of them. Even though it was a cartoon, we still got that vibe across. It was funny, but it was also creepy and a little bit scary. And so we were really proud of that fact, that it was kind of an intro for some kids into the horror genre.
So it's about 10 years old now, right? This episode.
Like as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, it's 10 years old. And,
10 years old.
And it still shows up in top 10 lists for Phineas and Ferb fans, which, like Scott said, it feels amazing. And, all credit to the whole team. Jim Bernstein and Danny Viteri also co-wrote the rest of the outline with us and contributed a lot. And then, as I said, the way these things work, these outlines then go to those storyboard teams. So we had 4 storyboard teams who came in and contributed, including myself, and Sue Perotto, who's the director. And, everyone really got it. I think the fun of this is that everyone really saw what the opportunity was and then leaned hard into it, because we thought it would be great to have real stakes and, actually put these characters who everyone loves, put them through their paces, make it emotional, make it satisfying, and then make it big and funny and entertaining in the midst of that too. And essentially it's like, I don't know that I could have done this on any other show. That's the thing, is that Phineas, by its nature, allows for this sort of storytelling. So it seemed like, there was some kismet in the way this all came together.
Now Doofenshmirtz, if I understood the episode correctly, he's not really setting out to duplicate himself, but his invention goes awry. Again, I got the feeling, again, the guy's seeking attention. I guess his brother is the mayor, right?
Yes. That's right, Roger.
And that's the guy who's going to be the target, because the brother is getting all the attention. And this guy's up in his tower, plotting. But, it's kind of like, I don't know what you call it, kind of like, it's not really evil. It's kind of like naive and just kind of dopey.
And he's self-destructive.
Right, exactly. So ironically, it becomes this virus is not a flesh-eating. It doesn't turn people into flesh-eating zombies or ghouls. It turns them into more of him. And
That's
and
right.
that's their tagline going around, right? What was it? More of me, more
Lots
of
of
me.
me.
Lots of me, lots of me.
Lots of me.
Which he
Yeah.
really doesn't want.
Nobody wants
yeah,
that.
yeah. and
No.
he starts understanding that it's like, it's that old adage, can you live with yourself? And it's like, and then when yourself is actually
No.
right next to you, you can't, so he doesn't really want that.
That's right.
And that's the funny, ironic part of the whole thing.
There's layers of resonance, Jim, that we were aspiring for.
Out of the two of you guys or whoever else was on the team, who is the resident Night of the Living Dead expert?
Oh, that had to be Josh.
That's Josh.
Yeah. I mean, and the piece of concept art, that poster, that was something that I did actually while I was pitching it, because I wanted the people on the team to get the vibe of what we were doing, and it was always designed to be a love letter to Night of the Living Dead, like 100%. I will say, however, that the fact that we got George involved to do a voice, and even Nick Frost and Simon Pegg was kind of like beyond, and like, and my understanding is it's one of the last things that George actually did. So that also feels like a wonderful gift that we were able to add even more immortality. What is it? I think he has a really funny. It's like, Scott, what was it? Dawn of the Dead.
It was like Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah,
and,
there was
these guys.
And then there's and they were actually playing Sean and Ed, which is also like a real gift, and certainly that was an influence on what we were doing. That they came out when I was in college, and what an extraordinary thing.
Great, homage, Shaun of the Dead, and even the, just working in the little touches, like, hey, we're coming to get you, Barbara, over the phone. That's
absolutely.
Like, and you know what? When I saw, I have to say, when I saw Shaun of the Dead, I forget what other, Living Dead zombie genre movie I saw at the time. But Shaun of the Dead is actually pretty scary.
Yeah.
Which they do with just, there's that one guy, that one kind of like heavyset black guy that they just white his eyes out. And he's just really spooky. But the first two zombies in Sean's yard are pretty scary. And then the girl gets the thing right through, it's like, and so that's a really good balance when you can do that, when you can actually pull off something that's unnerving, but at the same time there's all these funny these funny touches in it. And the same thing with they pulled off the thing that I always wondered if any, as a kid watching Night of the Living Dead, hey, I wonder if I could fake out the Living Dead by acting like them.
Yeah.
Would they go for it? And they pull it off in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
And then Night of the Living Pharmacists has a little nod to that, right? Too. They
absolutely,
kind of dress up as a group of them dress up as the. I don't have a shot of it, but as a Doofenshmirtz doubles there, but
well, and a lot of this goes back to, Jim, something you said in our introductions. We were talking about how to do a good homage. And certainly, like I said, we wanted to do a love letter, but a lot of this comes back to something that Scott and I talk about all the time as horror fans who are working in a genre or even a media that's for all ages. We work on a show that's for everyone to watch, and that's what we want. But the idea is that doing this right, you can have real stakes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really huge. A lot of our influences, like, Scott and I talk a lot about Tremors. We talk a lot about Shaun of the Dead, because what it does is it gives you humorous characters who react like you and your best friend would react. But the stakes are real. It's actually scary. And certainly that was a priority for Pharmacists. Certainly in the finale, a lot of which was boarded by one of our resident super geniuses, Kyle Menke. And the idea is to keep those stakes real and characters that are relatable. Scott, did you want to share a little bit about that? I think that's important to this thing.
Just that if you keep your villain real, if you keep the threat real, the stakes real, then your characters can react how any person would react, which can be crazy or big or little or however, and you can get as funny as you want, as long as you still feel that impending doom. And so we just kind of did a 10 Little Indians thing where one by one, every single person in our cast gets picked off until there's only one person left who can possibly stop this huge pharmacist apocalypse. And you really wonder if she's going to make it or not.
And works really well. And they're running out of room. They keep having to climb higher and higher and higher. Similar to how Night of the Living Dead, they keep getting, it starts out like in the wide open Pennsylvania road, goes to a cemetery. Right. It literally everything goes south, goes downhill.
That's right.
The farmhouse. They don't really get too far out of the farmhouse. It goes from 4 rooms to 1 room, and then the hero ends up in the basement, or the
That's right.
De facto hero.
That's right.
Same thing. You start picking everybody off, and then you have this last one who's trying to make the mad dash to, do what they have to do to kind of turn the tide at the last minute. So, and any other, so that's very Night of the Living Dead, or very, horror movie, down to the wire. Any other specific Night of the Living Dead references you could think of that you were, trying to get in there?
There's a handful. I mean, certainly like the shape of it, right? Like you're saying, Jim. I think there are certainly things that in my first pass that were maybe references to Dawn or Day that we probably couldn't get away with. There's certainly there's things about, and as you called out, it's like there's the Shaun of the Dead reference. But I think largely where we focused our energy was, how are these characters going to bounce off of each other? And so the idea is like, how do we take the structure of what Living Dead did so beautifully, and how do we mirror that for what works in our series? Like if they have to move and then find shelter again, what does that look like? And then also for me, I think, and Scott, feel free to weigh in. I think some of the references have more to do with tone. It has more to do with us trying to convey what that feeling is like, where it's like the world is all kind of against you. And I think there are moments in the musical sequence in part 3 or 4, I think, where it's like you're seeing all the Lots of Me and Doof doing his thing, where it's like some of that could be staged in, out in front of that house on the lawn. So it's really trying to mirror and reflect some of those things that, were so iconic so many years ago, and just they still hold up like that. I mean, that's what's so extraordinary to me about it, is that not only is there's things that still resonate with new audiences. I just showed my 15-year-old last year, but the idea that there's storytelling things, there's functional things, there's technical things that even a show like ours could, take and find inspiration from.
And there's not, like Night of the Living Dead, there's really not a villain. It's kind of like Harry Cooper is the de facto villain, Ben is the de facto hero, but neither of them is, 100% hero villain. Harry's really his own worst enemy. He's clever and he may have some good ideas, but he can't function among other people enough to get everybody on board with his ideas. He's just pissing them off. And Doofenshmirtz is kind of like that. He kind of can't get out of his own way.
Being his own worst enemy. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, because I've always said about like Night of the Living Dead, it doesn't have a villain. It doesn't have the authority figures. The authority figures are just as bumbling as everybody else, to the point where they wipe out the main guy. They're their own worst enemy as well as everybody else's. So, but that's why it works. That's why people still argue. But they should have did this or they should have did that. audience, it doesn't matter what your position is on it. The point is that they do still argue about it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody still has a stake in it. This some 56 years after, where they're still, going at it, and that's the mark of good writing, and just good characterization.
I watched it again last night just because I thought, I don't want to say the wrong thing if I haven't seen it in a few years. And I found like the group of uneducated white men with guns heading out to shoot everything they see was scarier than the zombies. I mean, it literally, you look at it and it's like, that's dangerous. The monsters can be zombies or they can be people. It just depends on where you stand in their eyesight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that they do it with such, I don't want to, authority is not the right word, but, they don't, I've always said it also about Night of the Living Dead, the original, is that it's not over the top. The posse, yes. This sheriff looks like he put his suit and tie on and the hat with the cigars, and it's like he's going out to find a lost dog or anything else that a rural sheriff does. But he's going out to shoot walking corpses. And some of the other guys are dressed the same way. It's like, let's go do this. It's not like the remake where the posse becomes like almost a caricature of itself. Mm-hmm. So these are real people. They come across as real people. But what's unnerving about it, I would say that's as a kid watching Night of the Living Dead. I mean, I saw it in the 70s. I'm old. It was on television syndication. There was no cable TV at that time. And, you, as a kid, you would, not even 10 years old, you would open up TV Guide and you would figure out what you're going to watch that week. And here comes this movie, Night of the Living Dead, that I had seen a still from. And it's like, well, it's got, some kind of monster in it, so I have to watch it. And then all of a sudden, out of left field comes this, very different film from all the other horror-related and monster-related entertainment you would see on TV, and to the point that you're not even sure, like, well, who are these actors? I've never seen any of these people before. Mm-hmm. This is, there's no Vincent Price, there's no Boris Karloff. There's none of them portraying that, the stereotypical scary movie character, or if they're the hero selling it, like selling the crazy concept. And it just the final feeling is that it's unnerving. And I think, like with something like the Posse, what's unnerving about them is that they're just so commonplace, and they're treating this thing like but it's another thing we got to go out and do, and so let's just get it done. And that's the cool thing about it. The like I said, I don't get that same feeling watching the remake. Let alone like all the other, I'm talking about the official remake, the one that George wrote and the one that Tom Savini wrote. But to portray the Posse in particular as so over the top, where they're having like games and stuff, and that's fine, but it's a different kind of movie, and it's making a different kind of statement. And I think have stuff like that in a film, but it's a different kind of film. It seemed like everything in Night of the Living Dead, the original, just really works well together. It
feels like a documentary. It feels like a documentary. There's something about it that feels dangerous. There's something about it, like the casualness of that Posse. It feels like they just went outside and captured it, right? Mm-hmm. They just went outside and shot it. Like there's very little artifice. And what's also interesting to me about it is that that's also kind of the latter half. Like the first half, we're really with these characters, right? And we're really pulled along with them. But by the time we get to the back half, it's like, oh, what would this be like on the next day? Right? What would this be like the morning after? And so I think that's where there's these elements of satire. There's these elements of not comedy, but commentary, right?
Yeah.
And so that's that casualness, I think, that you were responding to. But I do think that it looking almost like a documentary made it feel dangerous. And I think not recognize any of these actors, like most of us who came to this, right? It makes it seem like, wait, what is this? Like, is this real? Where did this come from?
I didn't think it was real, but I had that feeling of it.
The feeling, yes.
I had that feeling that, well, again, you become involved and you become engaged, and that's what you want for any kind of dramatic project work. You want the audience to become engaged. I remember thinking as a kid, I'm always going back to, even when we do, products for Image 10, we license products. What we always have our eye on is everybody has their Night of the Living Dead story. Everybody remembers when they first saw it, what the feeling was from seeing it. And each time we do a product, we're trying to, whether it's us or more likely being licensed out to a manufacturer, we're trying to keep our eye on what can we do to make this product just, what can we do to to send it back to that feeling, like when the customer sees this, when the fan sees this and picks this thing up, this product up, or listens to it, or whatever, whatever the thing is, can we capture a little bit more of that feeling for them? Like when they first saw it, can we give them a little bit more of that? And I remember as a kid, I'm always thinking back, like, okay, well, what were my original, original feelings about this that got me obsessed with this movie? Was that I remember thinking, hey, I wonder if these characters would, if they knew what was going to happen to them, if they would just bolt from the farmhouse, because that was probably their best chance instead of trying to ride it out.
That was it, right? That was it.
Maybe they should have just, like, certainly Ben would have just done so much better saying, actually, you guys are messed up, I'm leaving, and just taking off.
He would have lived a very long life.
Exactly. And so, but he threw his lot in there, and that's like what came out of it. But I remember thinking that I was so engaged by the characters, and you just didn't get that, watching, like, say, Vincent Price in The Tingler, or even though he was a great actor and he could carry a movie along and make you believe whatever the hokey premise was. You just weren't that engaged, saying, well, what could he do differently so that there's a more, a less dreadful outcome to this film. So.
They're all doomed.
Right.
The thing that I always wanted, and I actually did a little bit of concept art for this when I was doing my grad program. And I'll send that out, and I'll be sure to tag you in it. But I always wanted to see the story of Beekman's Diner. Like, I always wanted to see what happened to Ben before, because I feel like, to your point, the guy who showed up and tried to make a go of it here, right? There's got to be a reason. And it's like whatever he experienced there at the diner, things that he said or that he didn't say, I think that, for me, that was always part of the appeal, is that his monologue almost feels like a short little radio play. And kind of the richness of, what George and John Russo put together in that script is like all these people had lives before we met them. And this is one of those things people talk about in drama, whether it's television or books or what have you. But that's how you want to build a character. You want to have a sense that they lived life before this and potentially after. Not in this case, obviously. No. Right. Everybody's gone. But the idea of, like, catching up with everybody, I think that was one of the things that I really responded to, even when I was very young, when I first watched this, because I was like, oh, like, what happened? What got everyone to that house? Like, I want to know,
And it's from even the first scene, maybe even the first line, you start finding out people's attitudes about things. It's not just we're visiting the cemetery. It's, we had to drive this far. And why do we do this? And it's your mother makes us do it. And there's all this attitude towards what they're about to do, which wasn't necessary. You could have just taken some people wandering the cemetery and started zombies coming out. But even the entry into it is people who've got an attitude of what they're doing and opposing views on things.
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly George Romero's style. When we were putting the Criterion, when the Criterion set was being put together and I was contributing, the producer messaged me and asked me a question. He said, "Hey, these guys are putting together this, this thing that kind of breaks down." It was called every frame of painting or something along those.
Oh yeah.
It's break down, all of that. And their question was, well, do you think this is George's first feature film? Do you think he had this style before, or did he develop it with Night of the Living Dead? And I remember asking him, well, wait, do you have one of, send me, do you have this commercial?
Yes.
It was a commercial for the beer where the guy's doing the lawn and the wife brings out the his and hers beer and he takes both of them and he gives her the lawnmower and she has to do the lawn herself while he's sitting there drinking. And the wife is played by Lady Aberlin on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But anyway, that opens up with the guy taking the lawnmower out of the garage. And it's done with all these shots, like as many shots as you could possibly conceive of. So, anybody else would have just, okay, the guy opens the door and pushes the lawnmower out.
Yep.
But George made it into something. He had he figured out some kind of like visual characterization of the task. And Night of the Living Dead has that in spades. I mean, exactly what you're talking about. You didn't have to have all of that development between Barbara and Johnny, but it's great that you did. It's great that it's immediately engaging, and there's arguing about the we lost an hour and all this other crap, and the kind of the mockery of the dead and who even remembers this guy? It's his father. I don't remember him.
It's great, and Johnny's a schmuck. I mean, one of my favorite things is he's like busting Barbara's chops so much. But like the beauty of it is that he feels like an older brother who's a jerk. Like you don't have any question about what their interpersonal dynamic is like. It's all there. And I feel like so much of our job as writers and storytellers, whether it's an 11-minute piece of animation or if it's something longer that we're putting together, like job one is falling in love with those characters, getting people engaged, right? Not necessarily appealing, which is kind of a dirty word, or likable, I should say, but appeal is the thing that we're shooting for. Mm-hmm. And it's like when we meet Johnny and Barbara, like they're so appealing as a duo, right? We're like, God, that guy's so annoying. He's such a pest. And you're like, Barbara, like be more assertive, like, like, come on. And she starts to do it.
There's the irony as well, is if Johnny wasn't a jerk, the cemetery may have had a different outcome. And then you wouldn't have a movie. But because he's such a kind of like know-it-all and very dismissive of norms and we have to do this crap again and there's no sense in my going to church. Whether or not you're a religious person doesn't really matter. The point is that this guy just has it out for everything.
He does.
And so his guard is down. I mean, he does respond. He does rise to the occasion and respond to save his sister, but by then it's too late because he's been caught off guard. And the first part of the movie is pretty much like that. Is that all these, you're not told right off the bat this is what's happening. You're told, there was just this stranger and we got attacked in the cemetery. And little by little you're fed more and more, and then the movie changes from Barbara's perspective to Ben's perspective,
right?
Because he's a little bit more, centered, and he's got a little bit more information. He's had a little bit more experience with the crisis at hand, and he starts feeding the audience things. Well, I figured out that they're afraid of fire. I found that out, and little by little, you're getting, like a little bit more. And then I think that's where the dynamic of the movie changes, as you were saying, that the first part of the movie is kind of like this shrouded mystery, and then when you're literally the lights come on in the farmhouse and they're watching TV and they're being given the entire story. That's where that normalcy part becomes very unnerving.
Yes.
Looking like it's not the hiding in the shadows first part of the movie. Like something is going to jump out at any minute. It becomes
the world
commonplace.
expands, and the world expands a lot. I think, and one of the things you just pointed out, Jim, which I think is right on, is it's like it's in Ben's character to have paid attention. So it's in Ben's character to give us exposition, right?
Right.
So even though Barbara's largely catatonic for a stretch, it's like it also doesn't make sense that it would come from her, right? So there's a piece of it. It's like exposition can be very boring. Exposition, you can lose your audience, but it's like it doesn't. When it comes from Ben, it doesn't feel like that's what it is, because in my head, it's literally he's thinking out loud and he's going through a checklist of what he needs to know and what the next steps might be, because he's such a brilliant character.
And his goal isn't to just give us information; it's to try to get through to this woman. Like, do you know anything? Have you seen anything? Do you know about this? Do you know about that? So he's not just saying the boring stuff that the audience needs to know. He's trying to accomplish something and trying to save both of them in the process, even if she's not very helpful about that.
Yeah.
Right. And then even better than that, after he has that long dialogue and then knocks her out, there's another great scene for me anyway, is when he's just smoking the cigarette and exploring and he finds the rifle. Again, that would be in lesser hands, it would be like, okay, well, he goes to that closet over there, rummages around, finds shoes, and then he finds the rifle. But George does this long build up to that. And there's like exposition without the character saying anything.
Absolutely.
You just heard what he went through. You're getting more information. While this is going on, the radio is just tossing out all these, zingers. They're leading up to evidence of the bodies having been partially devoured. You haven't been
so good,
nugget yet, but having that kind of static going on of just the radio voice, and it's giving you all this stuff while this guy is, exhausted from having put up all that lumber on the windows and nailing full doors up to a window. It says so much about the character without him saying anything.
That visual storytelling and that behavior, that's the thing I think that gives it so much of its power. And I feel like that's why this movie, people keep going back to it. Like, I think part of the longevity is, and the lesson for filmmakers and for writers and for actors, it's like, okay, we didn't have any money, so what do we have? So we have one location, and then, okay, but let's make a meal out of it. Let's make a meal out of these performances. Let's make a meal out of these wonderful actors and their faces and their behavior. And it's like Ben can fill endless amounts of screen time because he's such a wonderfully charismatic character, wonderfully charismatic performance. He's so naturally and effortlessly engaging that it's like they're just, use him to fill your running time.
There's a big chunk of the second act where there's no zombies, or maybe it's one shot of the zombies out by the car every once in a while, but you're never bored. You're like, the drama is between these people. Are they going to kill each other? Are they going to combine to work together? What's going to happen? And it's just as interesting as the supernatural part of it.
Yeah, it's I've always chalked it up to the movie. The story that they're trying to tell, or that they are telling, has to have certain conceits to it. Ben's going to end up in the cellar. There's the irony there that he ends up in the cellar. The door is going to hold. It doesn't make sense that it holds. In fact, you could visibly see it split down the middle, but they're not going to get in because that's one of the conceits. And the other conceit is, even though they expertly put those characters in the house, and it's believable that they stay there. It's believable when Ben makes the decision, well, they know we're in here now, and then he decides, well, we're going to stay put. His initial intuition is we have to get out of here. We got to get where there's other people, that people can help us. Let's get some food. Let's get out of here. And that's what he's going for. And circumstance puts them, he realizes that he's outnumbered. And so it's believable that they stay there. But to me, the other primary conceit is kind of like the thing that you just said, Scott, about there's these long stretches where really nothing is happening. Once you actually see the ghouls, you know, like, again, the lights kind of come on and you actually see them, you see how easily they're defeated and also easily fooled. You know, you just wave a torch around and they back away, or you light a chair on fire. The three men, you know, the able-bodied men could probably handle this pretty easily, not with a gun, but by arming themselves with torches and lighter fluid and just going outside and burning everything. But again, that's the conceit of the film. They're not going to come to that kind of conclusion. Nobody's going to be logical enough to say, okay, well, wait, let's not panic. Let's all get on board. Can we do something like this? But no one's going to talk to each other that rationally. As soon as they're all in the same room together, it's like water and oil, and they're all fighting each other.
One of my favorite parts is where one of the guys says, if the three of us work together, we can do all this in no time. And it's like, okay, so the women aren't going to be able to do anything. They're just going to
say, exactly. Yeah.
But if the three of us...
Yeah. That's another, you know, that's, you're talking about Tom, you know, the teenager, the pacifist, who is like, you know, just trying to bring these two guys together no matter what. And yeah, he discounts the three other, you know, at least two able-bodied women who could also help. And yeah, he's like, it would be better if the three of us were working together. We're gonna solve everything. It's like, it seems like it's the three of you guys that are fucking things up.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what's so beautiful about it is like they're all self-destructive. Everything that they bring to this situation is not helping them. And like there's no shot. I mean, that's some of the there's like no hope. It's like, Ben, just leave. Like you're yelling at the screen and you're like, Ben, come on, be more heartless and leave. Because Barbara, then he would live.
If Barbara had run in there by herself, closed it up, and kept quiet, she'd still be alive.
Yeah,
right.
Just stay there by yourself, Barbara.
I think largely we're talking about shorter films. I think these are not as interesting, shorter movies.
Let me ask about getting back to Night of the Living Pharmacists. So the version that I saw was basically like a two-part episode, which is how Disney Plus is now streaming it. But as I read, and as you've mentioned, as I read about the series, and then you mentioned before, so this was originally conceived as like 11-minute segments, right? And where two of those segments would equal an episode.
A half hour, yeah. And actually, as there was a hot second where it was going to be a Disney Channel original movie. So they had the team had done very successfully this extraordinary movie called Across the Second Dimension, and it was a huge hit on the channel, and just really it's great. And so there was certainly some appetite to do another Disney Channel original movie. And I remember Dan sharing with me there was a hot second that it actually would have been even longer. It would have been 3.5 hours. But as far as like structurally, Jim, like that's how we approach it. So each half hour is essentially 2 11s. So if you're including commercials, you know, most things are 22 minutes of running time, and then you're dealing with, you know, 8 minutes of ads. So
each 11-minute segment, is that like a separate story?
Normally,
or is it
normally
is it like a continue?
Yeah, normally we have 2 stories. Unless it's some sort of a special. I know Disney loves things they can promote, like a big Halloween special or a Christmas special. Right. So that's why they said, "Oh, this will be great. We'll make it 22 minutes. It's its own half hour. It can be our Halloween special every year for the next 10 years."
And then it was also a 2-parter. How often is it that there's a 2-part, 22-minute 2-parter episode for this series?
I'd say not very often. Maybe like 2 or 3 a season. Does that sound right, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. And at that point in the series, we were some of the mandate was to do more of these specials. So it kind of slipped in there in perfect timing, really.
What I like about it is it's I think one of the ones that I did see is was a specifically Halloween themed special where it was about like it was similar to like that Simpsons thing, where they have the multiple parts or whatever. But what I liked about Night Living Pharmacists is that it again, it has that subtlety. It's the Halloween episode. It comes out in October, almost the same anniversary as the original Night of the Living Dead. But there's nothing about it that specifically, I think it does happen during Halloween, right? That's the setting, if I'm remembering. But it's not it's just.
But it's not about that.
Over the top.
No,
it's just something that happens to happen during Halloween.
Yes,
so, I like that the subtlety there, and again, the characters aren't, even for as goofy as Doofenshmirtz is, he's just not over. He's relatable. There's like so many aspects to him. Like again, he's not just this, kind of like hand-wringing evil genius who's got these big plans. He's trying to, make his way in the world just like everybody else. Maybe in this, kind of like self-grandiose way, but at the same time, he's got the same, frailties everybody else has.
It makes him a lot of fun to write. It makes him a lot of fun to write, for sure.
Yeah. So that's really cool. So I understand that the series is continuing now next year. So are you guys involved with that? You're doing the writing on that?
Yep, we've got a lot of the old folks back. I'm back, and Josh is back. Some of the other writers, some of the other team members. So Dan and Swampy are back. So we can't talk much about it, but it's really feeling like the old series. It's not feeling like a reboot, which is not something anybody wanted. It's feeling like more of what people wanted. So that's great. It's been a lot of fun.
And we're very much treating it that way creatively. So I think it's since I joined late in season 4 last time, like I'm so thrilled at the chance to get to tell more stories and play in the sandbox. I think we're all hoping that we get a nice long run and that people really enjoy seeing the series again. They just recently made a exciting casting announcement in New York Comic Con, so we've got we're getting that band back together, and it feels really good, and we're getting some wonderful feedback from the actors and our team, and that's huge. In fact, this week, I didn't know this, but one of our storyboard artists, Dodo Kitcheron, actually grew up watching the show and watched Night of the Living Pharmacists when they were younger, when they were a kid, and it scared them and it freaked them out, and now they're working on the show. So it's like that's kind of where we're at in kind of the legacy of the series, and that feels really special. That feels like a lot to be grateful for.
It's a weird. I was just gonna say it's a weird overlap between Night of the Living Dead fans and Disney Channel fans. You wouldn't think there's a lot of intersection, but apparently there is.
Actually, I find that all the time. I work somewhat with the actors and filmmakers that were involved in the Godzilla series and the Japanese special effects films, and we find that there's more crossover among these groups of fans with George Romero in general and with Japanese monster movies. So maybe it all came from that's the stuff that was. I mean, that's the reason I'm interested in is that's the stuff I was exposed to on television when I was a kid.
Sure,
there was only 3 channels, 3 network channels and 2 or 3 local channels at the time, and you had to watch whatever was there. And the local channels seemed to get the Godzilla packages, or Doctor Who, from
absolutely.
the UK, and they would get all the foreign stuff, Monty Python. So that's how you were as an American kid, you were exposed to all that stuff from all over the world. I guess it was cheaper to get, but it all had, so much imagination, and that's what the important takeaway from all of this is. Night of the Living Dead and George Romero movies in particular just have just a strong sense of imagination and this kind of like, well, what if we do this, or what if we present this? And the great thing about I guess working in animation, being able to come back to this series is you could pretty much bring it back to like exactly where you left off. And
the animated characters haven't aged a day, so that's
exactly
really
so. And bring the same sensibility to it, whereas with other things, it changes. And this series also has it's not something that it started in 2007. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then over the course of 7 years, there was 4 seasons, and now jump ahead 10 years, and now the 5th season is coming. So that's covering a pretty wide range. There's not a lot of other series that I could think of, or long-running series that kind of work that way.
No, not like that.
Yeah. There's a lot of times. I mean, you'll see so many series that people are trying to bring back. It's all repetition. But yeah, I don't know of one that they bring it back and just keep going where they left off. That seems kind of different.
And it seems like the opportunity for us is like we've got fans who now are in college, and like now they're excited about coming back and catching up with the show again, and like that's extraordinary. That's not something that happens all the time.
What was we kind of like ran past it, but what was the I would say the idea and then the process of bringing George in for this cameo? When did that come about in the episode, or in the making of the episode?
I know it was something that was late in the game, and I think largely we have Dan Swampy to thank for that. And I think initially it was pitched as kind of a joke, and what I recall is that then I think it was like, well, wait, we could always ask. We could certainly ask. And I think, Dan and Swampy did a tremendous job of kind of, just making sure that he was comfortable with it, that it wasn't something that was, that this was warm, and this was a love letter, and this was something that we were doing out of respect.
Yeah. It's not making fun.
Yeah. Yep.
Is there any other episodes along the lines of this homage that people should look out for? Getting into, if they want to check out the series, any other ones you could recommend?
I'm particularly proud of the Star Wars crossover, because we did something different. Whenever anybody does a parody, we'll cast this character of ours as Luke, and we'll cast this one as Leia, and we decided not to do that. We played it as if our characters had been in the original A New Hope Star Wars movie all along. You just never saw them. They were in the background or after the camera cut away, and that they helped make all these things happen that needed to happen in the movie. So it was a fun, again, kind of parallel story going along with the Star Wars story. So that one I think came out really, really well.
And what season is that in? Is that in the 4th season, 3rd season?
I think it was its own special. It might have been part or between like season 3 and 4.
I think technically it falls into the end of season 4, like Pharmacist does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Is there one of yours, Josh, that you love?
No, just this one. I'm insanely proud of this one, because it seemed like it was impossible. Like even when I was just brainstorming it by myself, I was just like, I don't know if this is going to fly, and so it appears to be a piece of my contribution to the show, which it just, to me, it seems presumptuous and a little funky. And certainly that's not what my goal was at the time. I just thought, wow, that'd be really fun, and I would love to do a zombie episode. But, like I said, the reception has been, just a dream, and the fact that we're talking to you about it, Jim, on this show, and the fact that Gary was like, "Hey, let's have these guys on,"
Yeah,
is
no,
crazy.
absolutely,
Is absolutely crazy to me. So,
one of the look, I always get asked it, and it's like, look, I had nothing to do with Night of the Living Dead. I'm just a fan. I was not even one when they were making it.
right.
So, but I guess because of the way that I talk about it, or all of the bits and pieces that I know, people are like, well, wait, so what did you do on the movie? Well, nothing. But my whole goal has just been, all this time and all this work with Image 10 that's been put into this is to just have this movie find its rightful position, because it was kind of discarded and,
Right.
by some of the people involved and some of the audience, and it just got this reputation that, oh, well, it's like this thing sitting over here, and it's like, and it's not. It's this important movie, and the influences and the legacy from it run deep, and so to have, the Museum of Modern Art jump on board and take this in, and then have the Film Foundation, Martin Scorsese's film preservation organization, get involved with, hey, we have to restore this. We have to do first-class restoration, and then to have George Lucas's family trust, among others, put the money up. It just says like how important it is that all these important organizations, gave it the time of day and elevated it, and so to see that, that means the world. I've always said, my opinion, Night of the Living Dead is certainly the greatest American movie. I won't even just try to excuse it as being the greatest horror movie. It's the greatest American movie ever made. And it's just a matter of time that the rest of the world kind of catches up with my way of thinking about it. So,
right.
I've always felt like, it was always talked about, Citizen Kane, It's a Wonderful Life. These have they're very high benchmark to meet. But I don't think anybody really talks, about Citizen Kane as much anymore as they do Night of the Living Dead. It just keeps coming up. So
I don't remember Molotov cocktails in It's a Wonderful Life. So
It's a Wonderful Life, yeah. And a parallel to this is the director who made the original Godzilla, Ishiro Honda.
Yes.
He made it for the same studio that Akira Kurosawa worked for, and Akira Kurosawa had the run of that. He could do whatever he wanted. He could spend 3 years making something like Redbeard or Seven Samurai, and he did. And Seven Samurai and Gojira came out at the same year from the same studio, but from two different directors. And you can't say enough about how wonderful a movie, how great a piece of cinema is as Seven Samurai. It's just this incredible film. But everybody remembers Godzilla. It's like that's the one that had that's the one that had the impact. And it's kind of the same this anti-war, anti-atomic weapons told from the Japanese point of view.
That's right.
But when he was doing it, it was modern. It was modern sensibilities. It wasn't a period piece. It's looked at now as like a period piece, but it's not a period. That was what people felt. He just was able to tap into that, and didn't overdo it. It's like that same thing we're talking about. remember reading an early quote from George, before his career really became, zombies and, one horror movie after the other, when he was really just trying to be a filmmaker and tell stories. I remember one early quote from him where he said he was just trying to get the characters to react as if a storm was going on outside. So you don't have anybody, kind of like, you don't have the women, and, grabbing onto a piece of furniture and lamenting about, how horrible it is what's going on outside. They're just reacting to this, situation that none of them want to be there. And I got the same feeling from watching, Godzilla, the original Godzilla, especially when I could see the Japanese version. And the audience, the characters, I should say, including the extras, just the people at large, they react to it kind of like how they react to the situation very naturally, as if it's like probably how they reacted to bombs being dropped on Tokyo during the war. So, that's the thing that really resonates. And these movies are successful because they have that. They create that kind of impact.
It is
go ahead, Scott.
It is kind of a man against nature film, both Night of the Living Dead and Godzilla.
Yeah.
It's not a character necessarily. It's like a force of nature that you're dealing with.
Absolutely, and that's the other thing that's always kind of missed is that it looks like we lost Josh's. He's still connected, but we lost his video. But
I'm right here. Sorry, guys.
Nobody will miss it.
You're good. Yeah, nobody will miss it. But I mean, that's the that's the great thing about that is the I lost the train of thought for a second there. Along the force of nature, like that tangent again, it's like it's not really the ghouls are people. Godzilla is
right.
Yeah, it's the monster, but it's really the victim.
Right.
It's really out of its control, it was turned into this horrific thing, and it's just doing what it does, which is lash out. And the same way the ghouls, or the living dead were originally people. And that's the horrifying thing about it is that it's you put yourself into that situation, and that could be us. That could be my neighbor, that could be my family member.
And it does make it more relatable, and the storm thing is really interesting because I think the you pulling Godzilla is really apropos. Like I feel like it's like people versus a force of nature, that. It's like, what do you do against that? Well, there's only a certain number of things you can do, and recasting it as a giant monster or recast. There's all these different ways to kind of approach it, which put it into this genre as a horror movie. But I think the success of like Godzilla -1, tells me that audiences are willing to stretch their suspension of disbelief and really appreciate these things when they're grounded and have wonderful character stories.
Great, absolutely. I wanted to see if anybody. I haven't really been paying attention to Facebook here, but I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions. I mean, if you do, I see people are watching, but nobody's really asked any questions or made any comments as we're going on here. So if anybody has questions for Scott and Josh, please post them and we'll get to them before we wrap up here. But along the lines of bringing George in, what was the kind of the motivation to bring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost into the episode as well?
I think that was Swampy too. Like he had been connected with Simon for some time, and was friendly with him and Nick. And I mean, they were super game. My recollection is that certainly hearing that George was in the mix as well was great incentive. So the fact that they were willing to do that and kind of send up their characters or even like essentially cross over with their Shaun of the Dead characters, that was awesome. That was so awesome, especially for some of our older audience who would have connected with that movie and would have gotten that reference. My instinct is a lot of our younger fans, they're not sure who those guys are, but I do think that Phineas as a show, we're wanting to pull the adults too, and so I think that's something that we earned. So that is.
I think Shaun of the Dead also resonates with a lot of the younger people on the crew who maybe didn't see Night of the Living Dead when it was first out or when it was young, and that's their Night of the Living Dead. So being able to do an homage to Shaun as well, which did so wonderfully with that area, that genre, is fun for us too.
And that was always the intention to have those two guys play their Shaun of the Dead characters, basically.
Yeah,
I think
get them.
Yeah,
so that people would understand that, or the people looking for that reference would get it. That audience that grew up with that, as opposed to the earlier '70s films or Night of the Living
That's
Dead,
right.
the original,
That's
or even
right. That's
Dawn
right.
of the Dead. They would get the Shaun of the Dead reference.
I would be all for getting Ken, but getting Ken Foree involved. But maybe one day we'll get to do a sequel, and who knows what can happen. Yeah.
That would be cool. You would have a lot of fans for that. Because talk about I have obviously a special affinity for Night, but if there's one movie that really has just permeated pop culture everywhere, it's Dawn. And you can't get any more into it as the brilliance of setting it in a shopping mall.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so far ahead of its time. Even to the point that I always felt that the remake, Zack Snyder's remake, shouldn't have been in a shopping mall. It should have been like in a Walmart or something like that. Like do something topical. You know what I mean? It's like do something that by that point malls are kind of passé. It was almost like, I've always joked that parts of Dawn of the Dead almost looked like Logan's Run, because Logan's Run was shot in some kind of shopping mall concourse or something, because it looked futuristic. In the 70s, shopping malls looked like the future. You would go in there and there's all the marble and the silver, or whatever, the metal, and it's like as a kid you kind of got the idea, hey, I could kind of live here, and then everything I need is within arm's reach. So this makes sense. I could see that the future according to Logan's Run kind of looks like a mall. So
it has that wish fulfillment quality. There's another show that Scott and I worked on together. Scott was the executive producer, Emmy-winning executive producer of The Last Kids on Earth, which adapted Max Brallier and Doug Holgate's New York Times bestselling series to animation for Netflix. This is a few years back now. But part of the appeal of what Max and Doug did on that book series is, it's kids at the end of the world who get to have that wish fulfillment of going into their favorite comic book store and going into their mall, and that's the fun, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I trailed off here, because we got a question actually from our producer behind the scenes, Joe. He's asking, at the time of the release, the zombie genre was really heating up. Did you guys think that this was a timely opportunity, or would you have done the story anyway, regardless of there being, I guess, other zombie films?
Definitely anyway.
Definitely anyway.
Chance.
So, yeah.
If there was an Easter film slot, we would have said, hey, what about zombies?
What's perfect for Easter? Zombies. And the irony always, because it's an interesting question always, Joe, especially when you look back. It's like it came out in 2014, but we were writing and pitching it in 2012.
Yeah.
And it's like, even at that time, zombies had taken a dip again. So Shaun was 2004, and I want to say Dawn was 2004. I'd have to double check the Dawn remake. So we had a run, and in there was 28 Days Later. we had a run, and then it dipped again. And right, that's the nature of the beast. But yeah, I mean,
actually, 04, I think Dawn was 03, and
Okay.
04 was Land of the Dead.
Oh, great. Okay.
Which that's kind of a, I've always, I've always had a sour taste about that Zack Snyder and a writer who hadn't really been proven yet, hadn't written very much, were given a bigger budget than the guy who actually conceived and made Dawn of the Dead.
Then what George
But
got,
it is,
no.
then he got on the follow-up film, and it's like, and the follow-up film, what he had there was so much bigger and so much more scope to it, and so many more characters than it actually needed. I mean, the original Dawn of the Dead is 4 characters, and you just fall in love with them to where you want to see what happens with it.
That's
they
right.
have such a cool character arc, all of them, and these movies like Land of the Dead, they just kind of like lost all that, to the point that originally the Simon Baker character, the hero or the lead, whatever, the one that the audience is supposed to identify with and go along, was supposed to be an African American guy, and they wouldn't let him do that, because it wasn't just a George Romero movie. It was a Universal Pictures movie.
Right. So, right.
So that changes things.
I think we still find it from back in 1968 till now. Sometimes the limitations of having a smaller budget, of not having freedom to do whatever you want, makes for a better movie. A lot of the horror movies that Josh and I like are the ones that are more, you got to be smarter. You got to think of interesting things because you don't have a huge budget for CG or for something else. Mm-hmm. And those end up being better movies sometimes.
Yep. And they don't take the one thing you say about George's films is he never took the audience to be a bunch of idiots.
No.
He would make an entertaining movie so that you could just sit there and enjoy it. Mm-hmm. But if you wanted to dig deeper, there was a lot of fertile ground to dig into, and you can peel away all those layers.
If you cared as much as he did, and he did,
Well, as you said, the cool thing about something like Dawn of the Dead, that resonates with everybody is it's like the wishful thinking. I could be in the mall and have whatever I want. So there's the premise. But then, like, what do you do with it? He actually introduces characters that you care about them. Mm-hmm. It's a struggle for them to get into the mall. It's a struggle for them to execute their plan. Mm-hmm. So they've kind of earned it, as opposed to the Dawn of the Dead remake, where they just kind of walk into the mall, which is fine, but that's a different movie. That's why I'm saying they should have made it a Walmart or something like that, because that makes it that's kind of like that clever humor, we can't go this way. We can't go. You don't want to go that way because something horrible is happening over here. Just take my word for it. Well, let's go to the mall, and they walk there. Well, let's go to Walmart. But the cool thing about Dawn of the Dead is after you have that great setup, and you're giving everybody what they want. The crazy 70s. The blockbuster films, Jaws. Young kids going to see all this stuff. The characters become so disillusioned and unhappy. Only George would think of that, and only George would portray it so well, that they, after fighting for this thing and earning it, it's actually like a hollow victory.
And then, in spite of that, it has like the most upending of all of them. Yeah. Like that's the other thing that, like, that, those last 2 minutes, it's like, it's awesome. It has.
We could have a whole episode talking about that, but
maybe more than one, Jim.
More than one. There's so much packed in there. I don't know if Scott wants, but he's that much of a Dawn of the Dead fan. Yeah, we'll think about it.
Yeah.
But I want to say about the Night of Living Pharmacists episode. It was made with a certain goal in mind. Did you ever think, though, that the audience, like some of the audience, would be scared by it? as you say, and people coming, up to you and saying, "Oh, as a kid, that really, that scared me or had that impact"?
I don't think we thought it. I think maybe we hoped it, but we were just so pleased with the way it came out, and then to hear that people actually did get scared by it was just overwhelming. Because I don't think we ever thought if we could get it that far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
It's
Go ahead.
engaging. It's
Yes.
engaging. It's not meant to be like, or at least the feeling I got from it. It's not meant to be like, ooh, really scary, things jumping out. It's supposed to be so engaging, where the same as Night of the Living Dead. Even though it's animation and it's got a heavy satirical tone to it, and these characters and the pet living his secret agent double life there, all of like that kind of stuff happening, but it's meant to engage the audience so that they go along with the characters, not so that they're frightened by everything, but then to actually have that effect where the overall thing frightens some of the younger audience at the time.
Well, I think that's what's great about gateway horror is I think there's a fine line where you can scare, and it's not about disturbing or really horrifying people. It's closer to a monster movie. It's close. Scaring is okay. Scaring is something that you can do on a roller coaster ride. Scaring is something that being scared you can do next to your parents on the couch. One of my favorite shows, of all time is Doctor Who. And it's like, one of the staples, one of the tropes of being a Doctor Who fan, either UK or here in the States, is this image of, hiding behind the sofa because, the Daleks were so scary in 1964. And I think there's room for that kind of entertainment if we're being authentic, if we're being respectful of the audience. And if our goal is, again, not to horrify, but let's go on this roller coaster ride together with these characters that you love, and you can trust us. Like it's gonna be fun. We're gonna have a good time. We don't want to give you nightmares. We want to have a good time.
What was this could kind of be like the final summation of this. This was done for Disney. What kind of challenges did you have in there, other than what you were talking about, that you were kind of bringing this animated series for kids, and then bringing this George Romero independent horror movie trope to the whole thing, and you were sensitive to that. Well, how are we going to work this? So you came up with a premise, but that worked. But what was kind of like the Disney response to that?
we never set out to be super gory or offensive or anything, obviously,
right.
But we also didn't try and edit ourselves. We didn't try and censor ourselves. So we've made a show the way we want to make it, and then if S&P doesn't like something, then we can find a creative way around it. But we're not going to decide, well, let's not do this, let's not do that. We want to push it as far as we can, and then have them take it back a little bit.
Yeah, I think that my recollection, Scott, I'm not there wasn't a lot of concern that way. I mean, certainly the show itself and Dan and Swampy had engendered quite a bit of trust that we can safely lean into with the studio, because they know where we're going to end up. They know the kind of show that we're going to deliver, and they know the tone, and we're not going to differ too much outside of that. But I think we definitely did get feedback that people were scared. Like we over the years, we've definitely gotten responses that like it did unnerve some folks, but again, not in a mean way, not in a reckless or a careless way.
Yeah, I actually found those. I was just reading up on some of the points so that I knew what I was talking about tonight.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
Came besides having watched the episode, which I did actually when we first started, corresponding. But not looking for them, I came across a lot of those comments. I mean, there's a lot of people out there saying either one, it's their favorite episode or favorite story of the entire run of the series, or that they were scared by it. So it has those two things, and that's amazing. Again, not looking for it, and I'm not looking to like blow smoke or anything by saying, but I mean, those were the comments that I was finding. So it's really cool that it has that it connected with the audience in that way, or in those two different fashions. That's pretty cool.
That's hugely gratifying.
Yeah. Was there anything that Disney didn't like, not about necessarily Night of the Living Pharmacists, but about was there anything that you tried to pull off in Phineas and Ferb that was just kind of shot down as like, no, you can't do that?
I think that's a whole other episode.
That's a whole other episode. Okay.
We got a lot of different notes from S&P, and one of the things we get a lot is that's imitatable. We don't want to have the kids to do anything even slightly dangerous that a kid at home could do, and that we understand that. We don't want kids jumping off the roof with a sheet and think it's a parachute.
Right.
But it can always get taken to extreme. But we have a lot of fights about what's permissible and what's not, and we always reach sometimes again it's a challenge. It's like you don't have a big budget, so you've got to find another way around it. So even when we've been told you can't do something, we find a creative way to get to something that's sometimes even more fun.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, look, this was awesome having you guys on. Great conversation. I mean, I don't know where the time went. I could keep talking about Night of Living Dead and Night of Living Dead inspired stuff, and
let's talk Ishiro Honda too next time.
Yeah,
let's do more of that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do a Japanese giant monster episode. But yeah,
I love it, man.
You guys are welcome to come on whenever you want. Just say the word, and I'm
That's
sure we would find something cool to talk about. Anything you guys want to say to the folks watching, or even the people that will probably catch this after the fact?
Yeah, what's our final word, Scott?
I don't know. I'd say watch Phineas and Ferb, but I think they're going to do that anyway.
I hope so. So we can catch everybody can catch Phineas and Ferb on Disney Plus. That's where I saw it. As soon as I found out that this existed, I went right there and watched it, and it's a lot of fun. And there are a lot of great kind of science fiction-y, themes, or even the regular episodes. I like the kind of like the fun with the science fiction aspect of it. That was the thought that like went out of my head. I was earlier, and when we got onto Godzilla, was that that's the other thing about Night of the Living Dead. It's considered this kind of landmark, really the start of modern horror, but it's really a science fiction movie. It's a science, the dramatic portion of it could really be anything. As we talked about, George was saying, well, just play it as if it's a storm. Telling the actors, play it as if there's just a storm outside. It's not this crazy thing of the dead coming back to life, or as Scott said, there's long stretches of the film where the dramatic, the tension between the characters takes over, and you really don't see the living dead. So that's not the important part, but the premise of it is very science fiction. It's a satellite coming back to Earth and so forth, and is going to do this crazy thing the same way. Like, okay, well, in these atomic bomb tests, there was a dinosaur, and now the dinosaur is Godzilla, and now look what you did. You can't put it back. So, when the dramatic part is cool, the audience accepts that crazy premise.
Yeah,
you bet.
Without it having to be like explained or. I recently did a piece that's going to be for a Blu-ray release. But we were talking about, or within the essay, I was talking about when some audiences become really dismissive of the science in these works, these otherwise dramatic works, but that have science fiction premises, and they, oh, well, that's just junk science. Well, of course it is, because it's fiction. It's like you have to have that leap of faith, but at the end of the day, it's not the science fiction that's it's not the science being based in fact. It's the imaginative part of it that's creating the driving force that you can now tell a dramatic you could tell a dramatic story against that backdrop. So,
if this crazy thing was happening, how would we react? What would happen?
What would happen?
That's human.
So that that's the cool thing. And that, I think, if people out there watch Phineas and Ferb, you will find a lot of those really cool, like, fun little science fiction things in there, even in the the non-science fiction episode. What was the thing with the I can't remember it now, but with the head, the baby head growing really big?
Giant baby head, yeah, floating baby head. Floating baby head.
Just things like that were are hysterical and right up anybody's alley that's into any of this kind of stuff. So
we try and entertain ourselves as much as
that's a lot of it, yeah. And I think with there's not much we can say outside of, with Scott and I around, there's going to be plenty more science fiction and horror on the way.
As much as they'll let us do.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to it. I'll definitely be watching.
Awesome.
Hope everybody else watches. So thanks again, guys. This was awesome. And
thank you. Thank you, Jim.
We hope to have you come back again.
We would love that.
That'd be great.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
You better watch this and try to understand what's going on.
This is the latest disclosure. The official Night of the Living Dead store is now open for everyone.
You're crazy. They have everything we need. That's my point.
Important, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
It's hard for us to believe that there are official licensed products now available, but it does seem to be a fact.
I made my decision, now you make yours.
We've got to do something, and fast.
Tell us what to do.
Make your way to the official Night of the Living Dead store as soon as possible.
Where is it?
Seems like it was pretty far away.
Forget it. It's at least a mile.
Well, we better leave soon. If I could only call the folks.
They might even be there.
We're able to report a definite course of action for you. Go to the official Night of the Living Dead store now.
Oh, I'd like to leave.
Well, one of us could try to get to the car.
Go ahead, go on.
I'm going with them.
Don't let this grisly development happen to you. Plan your escape to the official Night of the Living Dead store.